Hello. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. So I'm Hanna Kahlert. I'm with Midia Research. You may have heard of us before. Mark Mulligan, our founder, is in the audience and has done a keynote already today, so you may know of us already. I'm an analyst. We're a market research consumer insights firm in digital entertainment, primarily music. Well, not primarily, but relevantly music. And we've done 2 papers, white papers in association with TuneCore and Believe on women in music, where we basically looked at studies like the Annenberg study, which said there's huge inequality in terms of how many people there are, and we asked the question why to the creators and the people in the industry who live this reality. Yeah, which is why we're doing this talk, Muses and Wizards, a look inside the recording studio. And who better to join me than Marina, who is a music artist herself, performed last night. So yeah, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into making music and being one of these wizards that we're talking about?
Well, long story. Is it on? Hi, okay. Well, I started studying music as a kid when I was 9, then quit for when I was a teenage, and then went to college, and then went back to it when I was 20. And yeah, went back to it like quite strongly and a bit obsessively. And then, yeah, when I was 24, I started this project in which I've been working on for 6 years. And it's been quite recently that it started to work and we've started to get some positive feedback and like to create this web of this team and gigs, etc. And yeah,
very cool. So I mentioned the Annenberg study earlier. One of the findings from it is that for every 38 male producers, there's only 1 female producer, and you would be 1 out of those 38. So can you give us a little bit of insight into why do you think that is? And I mean, I guess we're kind of jumping into it, but that is the subject of the talk, so here we are.
Well, it's difficult for me to talk about this because I think it's a very, very complex subject that has to be treated and thought about with a lot of insight and a lot of accuracy. And I'm not much expert than a person who has studied it as any other woman or any other person who can have like a formed opinion about it. I can talk about my own experience, but thankfully, when I'm making music, I get rid of most of the attributes of my identity. That's one of the main reasons why I make it, because when I'm focused doing this, I stop being a woman, I stop being Marina, I stop being a daughter, I stop being a friend. I'm just in that outer space. I'm having some vacation of all the burden that is sometimes having this identity and these memories and these fears and these desires and everything. So that's what happens when I'm making music. I'm not making music as a woman. I'm just making music as no one, actually. Then there's another movie, another battle that happens when you display that music, when you get to show it in the business and when you get to actually perform with your body, being a woman, no? And then getting this sometimes recognition as a woman that is making music, or, it's when other people remind you that you are a woman, that you actually feel a woman. Why would I feel a woman otherwise? I'm not at home feeling a woman. I'm just, So
I mean, this is one of the, I guess, difficulties about having this conversation about gender in a creative space, is that when you are a creator, you're not perceiving yourself first and then making music. You're just making music. You're doing this thing. You're like channeling this creative energy. And so for people making music, gender doesn't really feel like it matters. And then for people who are then in the industry, they say, well, you know, creativity isn't gendered, like everyone's just kind of doing what they're doing, like people are just the best at the job. And then the conversation can kind of grind to a halt there because you don't want to overwhelm the conversation of why are some people good at some things and not good at others, and someone's just miraculous at something, and you don't want to necessarily narrow that down to something as black and white as gender. But when you look around the room and you say, okay, well, there's 38 male producers and 1 female producer, there's no way that men are just inherently better at this than women. You have to ask the question, why? And the answer is sexism, but you know, not always. So it can be quite difficult. But you mentioned that you quit, actually. You started doing music and then you know, took a break and went to uni.
Yeah, I took a break and, well, it's difficult to know sometimes why you did certain things, because when you get old, you have like a certain vision of the world, and then you interpret those decisions you made with the vision you have about yourself back then, if that makes any sense. So there's a lot of unconscious stuff, and there's a lot of things I think I did for some reason, but I'm not sure because I can't recall, or because I don't know who I really was. But for what I can recall, maybe it's because of the education I received, or maybe it's because of my personality, or I don't really know. But becoming a musician wasn't feeling like a very realistic path. And maybe because I see my parents have teacher jobs, or maybe because of the school I was going to. You know, I didn't ever think that was something I could do. No, the word music was always related to the word hobby, which I don't like. I don't like that association. So yeah, I don't know if that has anything to do with being a woman. Same way, when I started producing music, well, to start with, I was feeling very reluctant to start producing music because I'm not really fond of technologies and wires and, you know, and plugins, and all of that felt like, oh, like really, like, do I really need to get there? It felt like sort of something too complex for me. I was feeling too unskilled and old, and just not, it didn't feel like a natural connection. And then you ask yourself, because you get asked this, so you ask yourself, does it have anything to do with being a woman? It's like, can I be a woman and not feel really connected to technology and all this stereotypical associated with men stuff, and not be because I'm a woman? Can I afford driving bad and not for it being a woman? Because it looks like we have to do, we have to achieve, and we have to do perfectly all the stuff that women have been told they cannot do. It's like, I don't want to drive well, you know, and can I do that? Can I? And not, it seems like we have to prove, no, we have to prove that we have to do all the stuff that we have been told that we cannot do. And then if we don't do it, I mean, if I'm in sound check and I make some mistake, and it's like, oh, now they are gonna think it's because I'm a woman. It's like, I want to be able to not know how to do certain stuff, and not want to do certain stuff, and not feel attracted to certain stuff, and not have this, you know, bug inside. It's like, oh, you're a woman, you should prove that you want to do that and you know how to do that. And it's like, oh, I don't know. Sometimes I wish all this speech wasn't in my head, you know, but you can't help it because people talk about it a lot. Luckily, you know, like luckily this is finally becoming something. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I mean, a lot of the difficulties, a lot of the challenges that you can face as a female producer are the same as anyone would face, regardless of gender. You know, it's a newer, not necessarily a newer genre, but the music industry itself is changing quite dramatically. You know, the technology we have is very different. The way that people market themselves, a lot more people can become artists and do like DIY stuff, but a lot of it we're kind of learning as we go. And then, you mentioned having this dialogue in your head. And when you have something that makes you stand out beyond just like we talk about like norms and deviating from the norm, and male is perceived as the norm in an industry that was built by men back in a decade when women couldn't have their own bank account. So it kind of makes sense that there are some legacy behaviors that just kind of exist, and people learn from each other, and they don't really think about it. So there's kind of a perception gap there sometimes, because when you're getting into making music as a woman or as any other kind of minority, you suddenly have all the normal difficulties of being a music artist, but you also have these other smaller things that are just in the back of your head. So when we did this study, we found that there was a confidence gap. That dialogue in the back of your head is something that a lot of women experience. It was one of the biggest issues that they would raise. Not necessarily that they didn't think they were as good, but that they thought they maybe questioned themselves more. They were holding themselves back. They were more nervous. It was harder for them to take advantage of opportunities sometimes, but it also affected the way that they could present themselves and try and ask for more. And then that was also reflected in how the industry treated them. So you have like the value gap, which is a discrepancy in pay that holds a lot of women back. People see that, and then they say, oh, well, I am going to get paid less. Maybe I don't want to do that. And then there's the perception gap, where a lot of men, when we asked them the same questions, said they just didn't see the problems. Like the percentages were a lot lower. I actually have some written down, if you'll allow me to look at my numbers. The funniest one actually was when we asked if they had witnessed certain biases. So unconscious bias, 80% of women said yes, only 58% of men said they had seen it. Unfulfilled promises, so an industry saying it's going to make changes and then maybe not making those changes. 74% of the women we interviewed said yes, we've seen that, and only 50% of the men said they had. And the funniest one, I think, is unbalanced parental expectations, which can really hold back a career when you're going from, someone in your 20s to someone who wants to make a more long-lived career. You kind of have to make it through that 30-year-old mark, and the industry kind of expects you to have kids and stay home with them. And so, from a strategic promotional perspective, maybe the managers will say, oh, well, we don't want to risk it in case they decide to leave. So these are these unbalanced parental expectations. 48% of women said they'd seen it, and only 34% of men had, despite the fact that men are having kids too. So, presumably they'd see their partner having these expectations and would understand there's a difference there, but that means that they themselves are probably part of that problem because they're maybe just expecting their wives to do it. So anyway, yeah, we have these like four main gaps. We called them there was harassment, which is a serious issue, which we don't have to talk about if you don't want to, but there's the value gap of being paid, there's a perception gap of who's seeing it, and there's the confidence gap of just holding yourself back. So yeah, I went a little bit on a tangent with that one, but I guess the reason we have these conversations is not just to complain about these things, but to ask, if there's a problem here, what can we do to make it better? And we need to understand the problem in order to do that. So I don't know, what do you see, what is something that if you could change the industry, you'd want to change about it? Or do you think that there's stuff we can start doing? Or do you see it already happening? I mean, the industry's changing a lot as it is.
Well, there's something going on in this industry for what I've seen. This is my opinion. But it's so difficult to make it that when you actually get something, certain income, certain respect, you feel privileged. As you may not feel privileged when you get a job in any other field. You feel like you're very lucky and you cannot touch that. And so that maybe holds you back from validating some feelings you've had for how you've been treated, or to actually explain them because you fear being cancelled if you speak. So that's something there. Then yeah.
Well, I guess there's like a gratitude to it, right? Where it's so hard to make it in this industry and so hard to be able to make a living doing what you love to do that you almost can be scared to
Totally
say there's a problem.
But for example, I always I've also worked in a music school, and I know that if I had been treated in the music school how I've been treated in the music industry at certain points, I would have been able to sue or to there's like a legal code, I guess, that you can go to and say, hey, this is I don't have to go through this. Whereas in the music industry, it's a game of smoke and mirrors sometimes, It's like you have to feel very lucky for this you have. Don't touch it. Don't fuck it up, So yeah, I think also that, and this is something I've been, I think in my early 20s, when I was studying journalism, I was totally overwhelmed because I became aware of what the world was, and you're coming out of teenage years, everything is so intense. Then you see that, the news, it's all bad news. It's like war and everything's going like down the hill. And it's like, wow, like, I don't want to be unhappy. I don't want to, this might be like a selfish position, but I think I like built this like bunker or shelter in which I was like in this bubble. I don't wanna know much about it or too much about it because it really makes me feel upset. So making music is like this refugee, like this, I'm gonna stay here and because otherwise I don't really know what I can do. So I think a lot of social stuff that I actually don't feel proud of this at all because I think I've been too detached from a lot of social stuff and political stuff and economic stuff. So it's actually very interesting that you share this information because it's like, like a sort of realization of, wow, so this is something social, so I should be aware of this, no? So I've been like quite a few years pretty detached from all this going on. And, in my own, also I wasn't really touring or I wasn't really dealing with anyone because my project was very much in the shadows. So I was like totally in my own world. And it's not been until recently that I've discovered certain, certain patterns maybe. Personally, I don't know if this is as a woman or just as a person with a certain values, but I like to treat other people with respect, with warmth, with charm, because I think that's elegant and because that's empathic and because that makes other people feel good and it's like a good way of communication. What happens sometimes if you display your personality and your values in that way is that some people, maybe some men, can read that as you're not powerful enough, you're not scary enough, you're like a little animal, like a little bird that goes, pew, pew, I want this high, smiley face, and being very polite. And for me, that's being powerful, because you're being, that's being really sophisticated. That a person that does that, like awakes my respect and my admiration. But some people don't read it as that. So I've seen myself feeling a bit forced to be tough and to be rough and harsh and, not be too nice. Because if you're too nice, they are not going to take you very seriously. So it's like, I'm in this internal conflict because I don't want to stop being warm, I like being sweet. Also in the professional field, because music industry is full of handicaps and full of trouble and full of, and only if you're working with good communication and warmth and respect, only cohesion between the team is gonna lead you to the possibility of making it. So, in the recent past, I've started to ask myself, like, should I be more tough? Should I be more, even touring, even in sound checks, even in, it's like, I don't, my word is that I don't want to stop being nice. I don't want to stop having these attributes stereotypically associated with being a woman. I don't know if it's because I don't care.
It's something to do with language, kind of. And when we're talking about making spaces more inclusive and broadening diversity, and even just watching, it's not just in music, it's in a lot of areas of business and industry. As we're watching, more people from more different backgrounds go into different industries, the language that they use is very different. It's called coding. Probably a lot of you have heard of it. And I guess it's kind of an existential question, right? Of like industry as we perform it. Do we expect everyone to conform to the language that is the default in those spaces? So like, you feel like you can't be nice anymore because that's like something it's very female coded. And this is true as a woman in business as well, like if you code more masculine, if you use like stronger statements and you don't say nice things and you don't say like please and thank you and smiley face and exclamation point, people take you more seriously. And is it because you should be taken less seriously? Are you inherently less good at what you do because you added a smiley face and 2 exclamation points? Like, that doesn't really seem like the way that you should qualify someone's quality of work. But it is something that seriously affects a lot of people's ability to progress in any industry, not just music, but especially in music as well. When you feel like you really have to assert yourself and change the way you talk and how you act and how you dictate sound checks. But it really makes a difference because if you don't, you will have some people who go, oh, well, you're too nice. Or they try and take advantage of it, like you act too nice. And then they go, oh, that must mean they're flirting with me or something. And then that's why you have, I believe it was that's pressure to look good. 67% of female creators frequently feel pressure to look good. And 40% frequently witness sexual harassment, which is something that happens when there's the perception that if you're just being nice, the door is open for someone to take advantage of the power they have to, make a move. Which is horrible. And it's horrible as well to see that the number is 40%. It's 2023 and 40% of female creators in general, not even talking about producers in specific when there's so much fewer of you. Like 40% frequently experience it. That's a massive number. It's crazy. And it's a very delicate subject as well because it's something that, if you level it as an accusation, it disrupts, entire companies usually because it's not just one act. It's usually a culture of devaluation of people for being not male or, if there's a pressure to look good, that means there's an expectation that people are looking at you. And when people look at you, they're then thinking things about what it means when you look good. And, it's like a spiraling thing. The culture doesn't just start. Sexual harassment doesn't happen in a bubble. It happens as a result of a long chain of other more subtle things that are happening in a culture. And the problem is the music industry is not a very formalized culture. It's a very informal culture where we can hang out and make it's a lot of guys clubs and people, going to gigs instead of just sitting in meeting rooms and shaking hands. And so it can be very hard to pin down what that culture even is, much less how do we go about changing it. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yes. Well, as I was saying before, it's not been until recently that I've been started to think about all of this. Maybe my personal mentality towards my job and the direction I have is not always 100% healthy towards myself because I really struggle to live out of music and to be able to for this project to bloom and to to live out of this. So it's like sometimes I've allowed myself to go through certain experiences that, allow certain comments from men, or I mean, that I'm going to have to forgive myself in the future for having allowed that. I'm doing that in the name of my direction in life. And it's like sometimes I have this mentality that it's like, okay, if I want this, I'm gonna have to, surpass certain barriers or allow certain stuff that is going to make me feel bad. The question is, where do we put the boundary? Because sometimes it feels blurry. You don't know if you're disrespecting yourself for allowing certain stuff to happen, even if it's in the name of something that feels really big and profound. It feels very blurry. Also, I was I was born in '92, so as a kid, I was having an education that still felt very divided to an extent that is difficult to know, because if you have learned something in a very early age, it just feels natural. And then even though you deconstruct it when you're older, when you go to uni or whatever, it's like, you don't know. It's difficult to know. Maybe in 50 years, what we are struggling for now feels like already totally outdated, So I think I went through a lot of stuff as a woman and as a musician that I just thought, okay, so I guess it works like that, and it didn't even make me feel bad or threatened or harassed, because it's like, okay, so that goes with the pact of being a woman, being treated that way, and which sometimes is quite disgusting and disrespectful. And now that you grow up and you're in your 30s, and it's like, oh, you're still with all this, like, when is this going to finish? Like, it's like you get like burned from the sun, it's like you have like an insulation, and then your skin is like, doesn't allow any like soft touch. Like, you're totally like, just leave me alone. I don't, sometimes, I don't know if you get this, but sometimes I would like to stop being a woman or a man or any. It's like, can we get a rest from that for a while and see how it would be, because sometimes it feels like a burden, and all what you're saying about this pressure for having kids, and it feels like so that's like making music is also very tiring and exhausting, and it requires a lot of effort, but it's totally a different thing because you're actually taking a rest from all that stuff. Yeah. Well.
No, I guess I kind of started this with the figure of 38 male producers to one female producer, and if we ask why, this is one of my favorite quotes from all the interviews we did. We were like, why do you think people leave? She was a sound engineer, actually. Why do you think people keep leaving? And she goes, oh, well, there's only so much shit you can take. And it's like, fair enough, because it does add up, right? Like, it's the death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing. It's usually not one incident. And that's why when we have these conversations, the point is not like, oh, put all harassers in jail or something like that. It's open up a conversation about this so people can put in the work and listen and realize that sometimes it's the littlest things. It's passing comments or pressure to look good or assumptions about parenthood that really can weigh someone down with a really promising career. And they just decide, you know what, there's something better I can do with my time. And that's really a devaluation for the industry as a whole, because where's all this talent going? There's so many people out there who could be doing such amazing things, and they're just leaving because they, don't want to deal with it. However, you mentioned how much things have changed already, having to unlearn stuff that you learned back when you were in school, in the 90s. And I think it's worth remembering how quickly things have changed in such a short period of time. 3 decades doesn't, like the 90s, 20s, no, 2000s, 2010s, like it's a long time, but it's actually not that long in the big scheme of things when you look at like generations and what people know. And especially over COVID, over the last like couple of years, we saw a massive change in how the industry itself works. And that's changing how people are able to engage with it and who's able to engage with it. So the difference we saw between the first time we did this study, the pandemic had just started, you know, everyone was in the legacy industry, so it was a lot of like recording studios, a lot of in-person stuff, a lot of needing to know people, a lot of in-person stuff where the little things really add up. And then the second time we did the study was after we'd had a year of lockdown and everyone had gone digital only. Everyone was working from home. And we had a lot of young creators who'd actually gotten started during this period of time because one, they had the time, and two, there was nothing holding them back. They were like, yeah, I have everything I need in my living room. If someone bothers me, I just close the tab. Like, they didn't have to go into places where they felt unsafe. They didn't have to make these sacrifices because they were just entirely in control. And a lot of it was the tools. Now, a lot of like new tools came out that are super affordable. And that was really cool to see, you know, like we are seeing a shift, and I'm not sure if you've seen that as well, because you kind of had you started and then you took a break and then you came back to it.
To me, it feels like in the last years, everything, like there's been luckily so much dialogue about this and so much progress that I don't, you know, it feels like, for me personally, it's a mess. Like, it's a big mess because the simple questions, what is being a woman? No, I say, okay, I'm a woman. Do I feel a woman? Yes, no, I don't really know already. So I don't, even the simple stuff becomes very complex. I don't know, even personally and subjectively for myself, I don't even know. So how am I gonna, you know, I feel like I live my life, and even the music I make, it's like I do it. Look, if this is a paper, like I'm looking at the picture like this close. You know, I like details a lot, and sometimes when I question about the structure of a song or the structure of an album, it's like I need to get some distance and to see the big picture, and I get a bit dizzy, you know. It's like, wow. So now this is much more complex, like the whole structure of a song, and now this concept of the album, and what do I know about this? It feels too much. Even the little things in a with some distance feel already too much. Like even a family, no? I have 2 parents and a brother. That is a mess. All the relations there, all the loyalties, all the memories, it's already like a universe. Even interpersonal relations feel too much. For me, like even the small parcel feels already like a endless universe, no? So and that's also maybe why I've tried to detach a little bit from all the big scale things, because I don't really know what to say, because I feel too ignorant to talk about the big stuff, you know, about ciphers and about tendencies, and about, I can talk about what I see through my window, and about the experience that I've had. It's difficult for me to put them to say this is a tendency, you know, because I've had horrible experiences as a woman, but I've also had men around that have been amazing and very respectful and super much more sensitive and careful than a lot of women I know. So it's difficult for me to create. Yeah, you do get an experience from your teenage years to your 30 years. Sadly, you get your experience makes you not trust, makes you being fearful sometimes, and makes you not wanting to show your body because it might be too much, you know. And it's like, where did I get that from? I didn't used to be like that when I was 18. I didn't care, you know. I didn't see my body as something that could arouse people, you know. That's quite disgusting. So you sadly get this amount of experience. You don't know how. You start creating this. But again, I can talk about this little experience, but it's difficult for me to see the big picture. I wouldn't know if I'm saying something that makes sense or if I'm saying something that lacks some information, or I think I lack some documentation about it, you know.
Well, I mean, it's always hard. Like no one knows everything, but it's important to have experience to recognize experiences like yours, even if it's just your own experience, you know. And then that's where, you know, my company comes in, is we like ask a whole bunch of people and we say, oh, actually, you know, that thing that you thought was like just you is actually every single person we've talked to. So, you know, never discount your own experiences because you are one of a statistic, and that statistic is probably pretty high. I mean, I think just to kind of go into a more like hopeful note, a little bit about how things are changing and with the industry. You know, you work mostly on your own, I imagine. Like, you don't really have to deal with a team. Do you see a lot of other people who are now like a little bit more independent? I don't know how. Well, I guess if you don't really interact with other artists, because I'm asking because it's really cool to see a lot of people making their own ways in the music industry now, because they're empowered to do so with all these new tools that they have and a lot more autonomy. There's a little more support than there used to be. What do you see that's going right, and what are you excited about? And I mean, yeah, I don't know. There are networks and other people and new role models, and there are good things ahead. So I just want to finish with a focus on that, I guess.
Let me think. 1 second.
No worries. Spinny wheel of loading.
I think there are a lot of new role models, like female new role models, and that's very good because it's well known that there's a lack of reference, female reference in the music industry. To me personally, I resonate with some of them. I resonate with a certain vision of music and with a certain vision of the approach to music and of what path consists on. I wouldn't say I resonate with a female artist just because she's a female artist. I might have nothing to do with her, and I might have a lot to do with a man that sees music from a similar perspective that I do. I don't know.
Maybe it was.
I would say so much stuff, but I don't know. I don't know if it's
It's okay. Maybe it was a poorly worded question. I don't know. So we're. When we were talking to a lot of these women for this project, there were a lot of the younger ones who were saying they had all these opportunities, they could do everything on their own. They were super excited. They were, you know, I guess that's the thing when you start out as well. You're like a teenager and you have a lot of optimism. And then we also saw some of the women who'd been in the industry a little bit longer saying that, you know, when they got started, there was more expectation that they compete with each other instead of with everyone else, and they'd kind of had to go it alone, and now they were making an effort, like a conscious effort, to build networks and support other women and other minorities, and in general everyone. It doesn't have to be exclusionary, but trying to like break down these barriers and just support people in ways that they need supporting. And so it was kind of cool to see that from both sides, basically, people building these bridges to make the industry a better place, one step at a time. You know, it doesn't doesn't, not everything changes overnight. But yeah, I guess the point of the question was sort of to see whether you were seeing that as well, if you were seeing any kind of changes. But maybe not, you know, doesn't have to. Not everyone's experience is universal, so.
Yeah, I also, the pandemic years have been like a kind of recess from any, and before that, I was a musician, but at home. So I didn't get to have many interactions. I did perform sometimes, but it was like a quite isolated thing. And I worked with some studio engineers and some friends, male friends that were musicians, but everything was quite, as far as I can recall, everything was very quite smooth. And maybe I was having some mansplaining, but I mean, it's like I don't know. I don't know when. I don't know. It's difficult to talk about it because I don't know if the stuff I think feels right. You know, feels right to say because you might have get some mindsplaining, but maybe that person, you know, wasn't even aware of it, and maybe that person is doing that with the best intentions. So in that, I mean, of course that tendency is bad and we need to get rid of this and we need to change those patterns, but also in that specific case, maybe you are tolerant with that. Maybe your position is like, okay, whatever, you know, this person is like that, this person has had that education, we are in this point right now. So, you know, I guess I'll take it, I'll go with it, you know? It's really a very complex matter, and I don't really get to think a lot about this and I think it's the first time I've ever talked about this.
In such a meta kind of way.
I'm asking myself while I'm actually speaking, and yeah, it's very difficult to know.
Well, it's oh my god, my brain just went totally blank. Don't you hate it when that happens?
Yeah, like for example, I haven't had
like the whole of COVID.
Like I haven't had I haven't felt that competition with other females ever. But maybe I wasn't aware of it, or maybe it's because my specific case. I mean, it's a very particular case. The music I make is, to start with, very I don't know, experimental, they say. So I do what I want there. No one tells me what to do. So because I if they could, maybe they would, but I go to that with that already presented, and so it's like luckily I think the experimental field of music maybe is a bit more, you know, the canons or the tendencies are a bit more smooth, you know. No one has ever, well, I've got some comments about how should I look on stage, or about how sexy would I, you know, from some men, now that I think about it. But in general, I feel, at least consciously, quite free to do what I want in terms of the music I make, and in terms of, yeah. But again, I might be not aware of it, you know, because I think about some stuff that happened in the past, and I'm like, okay, I was not clearly aware of it. Maybe it was even better because I wasn't feeling pain and rage and sadness and, you know, like discourage. What you were saying before about quitting, and I was very, very, very close to quit not very long ago, because yeah, it's difficult to know. You don't know if it's because there's much more going on than than being a woman, you know. We also need to talk in some other occasion about not being famous, about not being popular, you know, about the discredit you get. It's just when you start, no one cares. No one cares, and no one, you know, even if they want to help, they don't have time, they don't have the space to. It's really rough. So you add, on top of that, you add being a woman, or it's like, boah, I'm really considering quitting because maybe there's no other option.
Please don't.
Sorry?
Please don't.
No, I don't think I would, but maybe in the past it would have been more healthy towards myself, you know, because it was sometimes quite unbearable, the situation, because you're trying to make it, you're putting a lot of effort. It's not really directly related to the reward you get, you know, and coming from the academic world in which that relation is very clear, the amount of effort you put into something and what you get back from studying and from exams, etc., then it's totally different world going on. And so everything, at least in my mind, everything gets blended, you know. It's difficult for me to separate. It's like, was I being discredited there because I was a woman, or because I was not popular enough, or because I was not making enough money, or because the music I make is not profitable, or it's probably multifactorial, you know. It's from a lot of reasons. And yeah, I definitely have been felt treated like I was inferior, and it's like, as through that I built like a strong confidence about, you know, about having the same value of the most successful musician and the most powerful person in the industry. It's like, I don't feel I'm less to anyone just because I'm a woman, or because I'm not successful in terms of money, or, you know. It's very tricky. Sometimes it feels like it has a high school. It's like back to high school, you know. Even when I was back in high school, it wasn't that pathetic. Sometimes, you know, the feels like the way we treat each other, and the way we, you know, we show or what we do is deserves some value. Sometimes we need to show that through recognition from prestigious companies or whatever, you know. So
there's definitely, we're running low on time, so I'll open up for questions in a minute. But yeah, I mean, I think I just want to finish off on there. In all of the findings that we're doing, there is so much nuance in how everyone, you know, goes through life and experiences difficulties, and it can be, you know, everything from what genre you do, to how much money you make, to what your, like, you know, cultural background is, to, you know, what gender you are. And through all of the proposed specific suggestions, be it like changing legislation, or like, you know, number of people at awards, really what is important is, particularly when you're trying to address something that is so diverse, just listen, like active listening to people who say they're experiencing problems, and then saying, okay, how can we fix this? And, you know, doing things one step at a time, and realizing it's not always going to be perfect, but then you learn and you make moves. But just denying that there's an issue is never going to be the way of fixing it. So yeah, in light of that, shall we listen to some audiences? I don't know if anyone has any questions or anything else they want to discuss. Feel free to raise your hand. Yes, I see a hand. You can talk loudly, or you can.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, you discussed the problem a lot and very clearly, but I was wondering about the solutions, because there is like this misrepresentation of non-male producers, but like the 38-to-1 division. But how are we gonna solve this problem? You know?
That is a very good point. Yeah, so there's a lot of different avenues to do that. Obviously, no single one of them is going to be perfect. When we talk about the gaps, so confidence, for example, is a lot of it is visibility, making sure that girls who are interested in this have role models and they want to do it, and supporting them with resources and networks and even skill learning, because the industry is so what's the word I'm looking for? Like informal, kind of like very friendly, buddy. It can be very hard to break into it if you're a girl and everyone in that room is a guy, like who knows each other and they like bro out or whatever. Like it's very hard to get an invite into that room. And so I mean, it's not always that specific or like, you know, that bad, but like even just finding access and feeling comfortable getting access. So being aware of that, it does vary based on like genre and part of the industry and country as well. But yeah, making sure mentoring and coaching, a lot of these resources are available, more visible role models, and some, not too many. When we asked in the survey, like we asked about 50% quotas in labels and festivals, but not too many people, only 27% said that that was something they thought was a really good idea. But even little things like that can be super helpful. Anybody else? Crickets. Well, if you're interested, I'm going to make the 2 reports that we wrote available to download if you tap the chip, so you can get all the data you want from that and the full version of our proposed solutions, which we didn't really have time to talk about today. So yeah, if there's nobody else, I think we can wrap up. Any closing remarks?
Thank you for having stayed the whole time. I'm amazed. Thank you so much for coming and listening and actively being here.
Thank you, guys.